Awesome. Hello, everyone. It's great to have you out here on this Friday. Appreciate you taking the time to learn a little bit more, about how you can improve your subcontractor management. So we'll go ahead and dive in here. Interesting stat, we found that on average, contractors use 24 different subcontractors to build a single home. So, obviously this is a very important aspect of construction. Managing many different trades is something that, as you grow and you add on capabilities, you need to be able to find the experts who can come in and do that. And so as project managers, as business owners here, you need to be very efficient and effective at recruiting and managing subcontractors. So I'm excited to just dive into some tips that we've got, also just help you understand from our experience why we believe that this is so important. One thing too that I'll note is that both a subcontractor could be, either a company that you're subbing work out to, who they would be providing, the labor there, or it could be an individual. I'll kind of just sort of use them interchangeably, but it is important that you realize that, they're not employees, and that you can, essentially leverage subcontractors to help you get more work done and be able to take on, more jobs while not having to sacrifice the quality. But it's all about finding the right people, having the right people on your team there. So we're gonna dive into it. So before we get into the tips, though, I mean, I think at the end of the day, like, it's so important to understand that subcontractors, they can cost you money in ways that you might not think about, beyond just kind of paying them to get the work done. Whenever there's issues, I mean, this can take cost you time. It can reduce your productivity when you're having to deal with subcontractors who, are causing you more issues than adding benefits. It can cause your jobs to get stretched out if they're not effectively managed, and if they're not getting their jobs done. It can delay, progress in work. And so there's all sorts of issues from a timing perspective that it's so important that, you make sure that you're managing your subs, and keeping them on time. And then from a money perspective, I mean, obviously, whenever there's issues, if you got to get back out there to go fix, something, or send them back out, send others back out, quality issues can come into play. And so, it's going to cost you additional money. Hopefully you've got an agreement in place with them that will sort of prevent that, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. But again, when things go wrong and you got to send somebody else out, or if they don't finish, again, your costs can go up. And so it's important to keep that in mind. And then from a reputation standpoint, you want to make sure that every single person that represents your company is doing it at that same quality and that same level of customer service and just respect. And a bad sub can really leave a sour taste in a customer's mouth. And so you got to keep that in mind, that you always want to make sure that the people that you're entrusting to get work done are going to lead to a positive experience for the customer, because ultimately that could affect your ability to sell and market later. If you start getting bad reviews, word of mouth spreads that you don't have great guys, or you don't have control over your subs or your crews, then that can negatively impact your reputation. So for all these reasons, we want to dive into how subs can be more effectively used and managed. So step one here, making sure that you qualify your subs. When you're hiring people, regardless if it's hiring an employee or trying to recruit and hire subcontractors, you want to make sure that you're always checking their work. Ask for recent photos, ask for references, talk to people who have worked with these guys, who have managed them. If they're their own company, or if they're just an individual, like, to the best of your ability, try to research their reputation, research and understand if they've got a bunch of bad reviews online, then obviously you don't want to bring them in. But you've got to do that extra research. Just because someone shows up at your door and says they're willing to work doesn't mean that you should hire them and that you should trust them. Check the references, do background checks, understanding what resources do they have? Are they going to have a team of people? Or do they have equipment that they're going to bring in? Do they have their own tools? Do they dress professionally? Do they, kind of provide that same level of quality, that you're expecting everyone to do, and that you're expecting to have delivered to your customers? So it's really important that, you take the time, hire slowly, make sure that they're a good fit and that you can trust them, and that they're going to be a reliable sub for you to use. And again, always make sure that they've got insurance. Certificates of insurance need to be collected before you ever send them on to a job site. And typically those are 1-year agreements. And so you have to keep up with that. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But if a sub's not able to provide a certificate of insurance, then in my opinion, that's just a hard pass. And you need to find somebody who is able to do that and understands what it takes to be insured. So things to consider, again, like, experience and performance on past jobs. How did they act? I mean, have there ever been any incidences of history? And, again, I would ask these questions during these interviews, understanding, were there safety, were there performances, were there injuries? Like, has anything ever happened around, those subs, whether it was their fault or not, it just being there, how did they react? How did they handle it? Make sure that they are, have got experience. They're not, just kind of walking off the street ready to, go swing a hammer. They need to be, experts, and they need to very well understand their trade. What's their availability too? Are they going to be able to get on the jobs that you need them on, or are you going to have, a waiting period? Are they fully booked out for, weeks or months? Like, and if so, then again, like, you most likely are going to need to find people who might have some more availability. Obviously it's ideal if you can keep a sub busy enough where they will essentially, dedicate their schedule and their calendar to your business, but that's not always the case, especially when you're starting off and you're kind of just trying them out on a couple of jobs. You will have to make sure that they can fit you in and that they're going to be able to, be responsive to your needs. And just in general responsiveness, like, how is it communicating with them, from that initial, asking them to come out and interview them and have a conversation, or did they answer the phone when they called? Are they replying to your text messages? Like, are they easy to communicate, to work with? Are they responsive? If it's taken a long time to get responses out of them, just on the forefront, then just think about, later down the road when you need to get updates and things like that, and they're not responsive. You want to make sure that you've got very highly responsive people who can clearly communicate. I'd also certainly, again, with that background check with, and even just asking them, I mean, are there any litigation cases against them? Are they in any, legal troubles, disputes, whatever it may be? You don't want to get in the middle of that. I'd say, again, just kind of pass if it looks like it's something that could affect, their availability, their quality, anything like that. And it just overall, I mean, can they deliver what you need? Are they going to be able to support, your project needs? Do they have the right skill set? Are they and are they capable of learning? How, where are they on the pendulum of, beginner to expert? And what's their desire to continue growing and improving their skills? You want people who are, very open to continue receiving training and coaching and improvement. And so, I'd say those are all kind of things that I would look for, when recruiting those subs. So, definitely, make sure though that you're getting qualified subcontractors. It's so important. Now, choosing how you're gonna, how you're going to pay them, there's a couple different methods. I mean, there's the time and material, which when I first took over the general contracting firm that I ran, when I built out the first version of JobTread, every single sub for every single job, we just paid them, time and material. And so that meant for, we basically had a daily rate, as well as an hourly rate for smaller type service stuff. But, basically we had a daily rate that they would earn. And, what I ended up finding out, and I actually ended up like kind of as I started reviewing the performance of all of our different subs and looking at, the bills and kind of how they were, charging us and what our, budgets were for those jobs. That's when I realized that, some of the subs were just much more efficient. And for the, comparable amount of work, one sub could cost us, far greater than another sub. And, the ones costing us more obviously had longer drawn out, work projects there. And so, what I did is I ended up following around, a couple different crews for a day. And it was very eye-opening when this one job in particular, and I'm sure you all might have heard me tell the story, but like, so the sub was supposed to be at the job at 8 a.m. to start. That's where I showed up. I figured they would be there. They weren't there. And so it was a gentleman. He had there were a crew of 3 of them total. They showed up about an hour later. They essentially had gone to Home Depot very first thing. So, instead of me having the materials at the job site ready to go, they had to go to Home Depot and purchase all those materials. All right, so they get to the job site, maybe working for about an hour or so, and then they realize that they forgot something at Home Depot. And so instead of one of them going back to pick it up, the entire crew went back to Home Depot, spent another 45 minutes or so at Home Depot, came back to the job site. Again, now it's lunchtime, so now we're taking an hour break. After lunch, they put in a couple hours, and then yet again, a third time, the entire crew gets up and goes to Home Depot for another hour. And I'm just floored at this point. I can't believe that we literally are paying 3 guys to go and walk around Home Depot, and the customers wonder where they are, what's going on. I'm wondering what's going on and why they keep going back and forth. And, at the end of the day, what I realized from this is that we were not, aligned in how we were paying our subs. By paying them an hourly or daily rate, they were incentivized to drag this out. Why would they want to finish this job fast, when they could just drag this out, do even less work, but still get paid? And so I learned the hard way that by doing that, we weren't able to lock in our cost when we sent out the proposals to the customers. And so essentially what we ended up doing is we switched to giving every single sub a guaranteed payment for a job. We basically gave them a fixed price for the exact scope of work that we needed to be completed. And, we asked them, give us an estimate of how long you think that'll take. At the end of the day, here's what we're going to pay you. And so, if they say it's going to take them 5 days and they get it done in 3, awesome. They get to move on to the next job. They're still getting paid the same amount. Now, if they said 5 days and it takes them 8, that's on them. That is not on us. We gave them a fixed price for that scope of work, and they need to complete that. And so now they had an incentive to be much more efficient. And sure enough, no longer did I see the entire crew going to Home Depot, multiple times a day. They wanted to get in, get the work done, and get out so that they could move on to the next job. And that's when I really realized that we needed to switch all of our subcontracting to having those fixed payments and those guaranteed amounts, because it just aligned us with them along with the customer, so that we all had a clear understanding of exactly what it was going to cost to complete the job. And then when I priced it to the customer, I was able to take that cost and, bake it in there. And then I added my margin on top, and I had a locked in price for that amount of work that we had the sub doing. And then furthermore, what we ended up doing is we started actually sending out bid requests to the subs. And so we would have, usually 2 or 3 of them, go and compete on the work, so that we were able to make sure that we were always getting the best price. Obviously we if it was close, we want to make sure we get the right guy for the job, but it just sort of helped them, when they knew that they were competing with someone else, it helped kind of keep them a little bit more honest and a little bit more competitive on what it would cost to complete the job. Because if they way overbid it, if they, just basically just price themselves out, then we're going to have to go with the more cost affordable route. And so it's something that was important. And then we could literally take those bid requests that they submitted to us, and as soon as we win that job, one click convert them into that work order and send it right back out. And again, we've got that guaranteed, cost locked in on our budget. And, it's just a much more effective, better way to handle, paying our subs. Now, with all that being said, there are situations like if you're doing, service type work, maybe, emergency service, like we at the GC, we had one of our divisions was service. And so, if any of our customers called us, maybe they got a pipe burst, we're flooding a room or a basement or whatever it is, they don't want me to sit there and generate, a proposal form and wait for them to sign it, yada, yada. That was a situation where we did have, an hourly pricing sheet that, already agreed upon with the customers. They just wanted us to deploy, the crews as fast as possible. And so, in those situations, it does make sense to, continue with the time and material billing. But, for larger projects, for more, if you're going to be, selling it with a fixed price, then you need to lock in your cost for the labor. And so it's so important that you really keep that in mind and think through that. So moving on, step number 3, get everything in writing. Like I can't tell you enough how many times, like just so many disagreements and so much he said, she said, like, a sub would come back and say, hey, the project manager told me to do this additional work, and I go to the project manager's like, I didn't say that. And sub's like, well, he he texted it to me. Okay, show me the text. Oh, I can't find him. Oh, he called me. Okay, well, I don't have a recording of that call. Like you got to have everything documented, everything in writing. I'm a huge fan of, even before you employ any subcontractor, you need to make sure that you have a master subcontractor agreement in place, laying out your expectations, making sure that you're crystal clear with that sub on how their experience and how everything is going to work, with your business. We just had an awesome partnership that we established with the Cromings law firm. They are experts in construction law. They basically have a master subcontract agreement contract that they can essentially provide you along with a customer remodel, repair agreements, contractor terms, conditions. You can purchase all those directly through JobTread now. I highly recommend it. Make sure that you are covering your basis, because you do not want to get into a situation where, again, we're going to have a bunch of finger pointing. We got a bunch of money involved. You just don't want to get into that situation. It happens so many times, and we got put in that tough situation where I had to decide, do I pay out the additional money and pay it out of our pocket, out of our profits, or do we, hold the line with the sub but potentially lose them? And again, it could have all just come back to miscommunication, and it can be hard to, really decide, where to draw that line, and you don't want to put yourself in those situations. So making sure that everything's documented, every single time we sent a sub to a job, we had a written work order, or, if it was, for supplier, material purchase, deliveries, what purchase orders, like whatever it is, it needs to be in writing. Create that documentation trail and have the subs sign those agreements. They are agreeing to that fixed price. They're agreeing to that scope of work. And if you don't get that signed off on and agreed upon and have that documentation, then again, when that worst case situation occurs and you have to defend yourself, you want to have all of those tools in place and have it all organized and documented for that job. And so even further, like on those work orders, making sure you're extremely clear about the instructions, the scope of work. Make sure that the subs have access to all of the files, the plans, the specs, like whatever they need to do their job effectively. You have to make sure that you've communicated to them with that and given them access to those resources ahead of time. There was nothing more frustrating when I found out that our subs were sitting on the job site waiting for the project manager to call them back or to text them or to give them instruction. They should have that every single time the moment they walk onto that job site. Like, do not wait for that. Don't sit there and literally have idle workers. You've got to be organized, and having your documentation created ahead of time and sent out is going to help make sure that that's there. And again, just outlining those expectations, the deliverables, if there is going to be, progress payments made to them along the way, that needs to be documented and agreed upon ahead of time. Don't get into it and then get in a dispute that is only going to lead to a poor experience for the customer. It's going to lead to the job getting drug out. It's not worth it. Have it all ironed out ahead of time. And then again, once you do start receiving your bills from the subs, making sure that you're doing the job costing to avoid any overpayments. Make sure that there is, exactly, it's very crystal clear which purchase order, which work order that bill is related to. When we essentially implemented JobTread and had these, POs and work orders that we were sending out, every single bill that came in that did not have that work order purchase order number, we just immediately rejected. And, for at the very beginning, we would, send it back and tell them, hey, we, can't accept this. You need to, add the documentation. But, it is so important, because that's how you're going to make sure that that bill matches exactly what that work order had and what you had agreed to. I can't tell you too, the number of times that, for whatever reason, and I don't know if it was intentional or not, it's hard to know. I suspect it could have been a few times, but, again, we received numerous double bills. And, when before we had JobTread in place, like those bills would just come in, the accounting office just entered the bill, would queue it up to be paid. Project manager didn't have visibility to this because they weren't in QuickBooks. And so many times, we would just double pay bills. And we didn't do the job costing. We didn't, have that, checks and balances in place to make sure that we were paying for exactly what we had agreed upon, and that we weren't overpaying, that we weren't double paying. And so, you got to make sure that you're not, spending money that you don't have, that you haven't, allocated in the budget. And so it's so important that, you keep an eye on the job costing in real time to make sure, that everything that comes in is expected and it's agreed upon, and that the quality and the deliverables have been met. And, it's just so important to keep track of that. So having the documentation in place is super helpful. All right. Tip 4, using a consistent communication method. I've started to hit on this a little bit, but one thing that my project managers would always tell me, and then the subs would tell me too, is that, they would often just be communicating in so many different, methods. I mean, whether it's a phone call, a text message, if they were using Slack, or if they, were just talking to them in person at the beginning of every day, whatever it may be, you need to make sure that you have an established, process for communication. Choose the method on how you want to communicate and stick with it. And if they try to, if you've told them, hey, if you need anything, you call me, and then they start trying to text you or email you or whatever other thing, you need to say, no, you need to make a phone call to me. Or, if you're using JobTread, and I highly recommend that you have them use the communication and the chat feature through there. When they try to go around that, you need to always just redirect them back to that designated channel, because that's how you're going to know. And it's going to be so much easier to have all the communications in one place. It is such a nightmare when you're having to try to track back, and it could be weeks or months, beforehand. You're having to go find those communications, and it's so hard to do it after the fact. So to the extent that you can, try to make sure that you've got a clear communication channel, designated times, and making sure that, both parties, like your project managers or you, are, extremely responsive to your subcontractors. Because again, the worst thing that can happen is they're sitting there on the job site just idle. You can't let that happen. It's your job to make sure that they get the answers that they need, when they need it. And, hopefully ahead of time, they're crystal clear on what to do. But obviously things will come up, situations will come up. You want to train them to stop work if it looks like something is going to be out of scope, or if there's an unforeseen circumstance, because that's your opportunity to come in and get a change order, get that negotiated with the customer, get that signed off, and then issue the vendor or the sub a change order as well. So, making sure that communication channel, that process is very clear, is very important. And then I'd also say, really understanding, when establishing what do you want the subs interaction with the customer to be, what is appropriate, what is not appropriate. Again, it's different for every business. It, depends on the size, depends on, maybe even the sub, but you need to be clear. If you do not want your subs and do not expect your subs to be, communicating and, essentially having those conversations with the customer about, the ongoing work, then you need to train them on, hey, thank you for your concern, but can you please call, the owner or the project manager? They just need to know how to, redirect them to the appropriate person if you don't want them, basically having that interaction with the customer. Some people do, some people don't. It's just be clear and have that expectation set so that they know what their, responsibility should be when the customer does, come up to them, because obviously we know we can't control the customer. So many times the customer, again, before we were tracking all this, a JobTread would come up and, somehow, twist the sub's arm and get them to go do additional work that was out of scope. And at the end of the day, we would have to pay it out of our pocket because we didn't have a way to push back on the sub. And, obviously when we find out about it, you try to get the customer to agree to a change order, but once the work is done, you lose your leverage. And so it's important to, have that as an established process there. And then, lastly, again, we got to think about our worst case scenario. If there is an emergency, if there's a safety issue, if an injury, whatever it is, make sure that you have a very crystal clear, what that sub should do as soon as that occurs. You need to document that. You need to make sure that they are trained. You do not want them in that situation to be unsure and to not do the right thing, to get a hold of you, to get a hold of emergency personnel. Make sure that's documented. It's so important. Hopefully there's never an emergency situation that happens, but again, we got to prepare for the worst. Moving on to tip 5 here, keeping your files, your photos, your jobs organized. It's so important. I mean, this is probably one of the #1 benefits of JobTread to businesses. Getting a system in place to organize everything, from collecting those pre-construction photos, just when you're out there kind of bidding on the job, collecting the before photos. Having that is so important, not only to help you budget out that job and flush out the cost and make sure that you're on the same page with what the customer wants, but again, it just gives you documentation of what the exact situation, what the state of that project was before you came in and touched it. You need to collect that information and organize it. And then again, along the way, collecting all those progress photos, that documentation of as things are getting torn out, as new things are being put in, as the project has been completed, and all the completion photos. Collect all of that information and save it in one place, have it organized. You never know when 3, 4, 5 months later, the customer could come back to you and try to file some sort of a warranty claim, or try to claim that you didn't do this right, or you did the wrong thing, or whatever it may be. Just have that organized. Now, when we're talking about subs, though, again, I think the most important thing you can do is make sure before they start work, do you have their certificate of insurance? Right after I took over the GC, I ended up getting, we got audited by our insurance provider, and they said, hey, we need you to send us all of your subcontractor certificate of insurances from the past 12 months. So I was like, okay, yeah, sure. And I go over to the office manager and say, hey, can you pull all those together for us? We need to send them over. And she kind of scratched her head and said, well, yeah, we've got some. I was like, what do you mean we've got some? Well, we usually collect it when they start, but like, a lot of those are expired. And so I was just like, wait, what? And we learned the hard way when we weren't able to produce the certificate of insurances for all of our subs. The insurance company ended up fining us $35,000 and gave us till the end of that month to pay it. Otherwise, they weren't going to renew our policy, and we're going to have to go back out to market to try to get a new one. It was just a royal disaster. And the worst part about it was that it literally would have cost us nothing more, but making sure that we kept getting the updated COIs every year. So like tracking when do your certificate of insurances for your subs expire, and follow up on that. And JobTread is my number one favorite view. Is here are all of my subs with either an expired COI or a COI expiring in the next 60 days, and that gives you time to make sure that you communicate to them that they need to start that process, get that renewal in place. You don't want to just spring it on them after it's already expired, because it could take them a few days, could take them a week, depends on kind of who they're working with. It'll also cost them money. So again, you want to make sure that you give them enough lead time, just helping them to be able to get that update to you so that you don't have a disruption in work and that you can continue to use them on your jobs. My biggest piece of advice: do not send a sub onto a job site if they do not have insurance. It's not worth it. And again, if that worst case scenario happens, you do not want to be in that situation. You need to protect yourself and mitigate your risk. So it's super important that you have that. Obviously having their W-9 on file, so that you're good to go with the IRS. And then that master subcontract agreement. Again, it's so important that you have that agreed upon, that signed contract in place. And then every single purchase order, every single work order that you send out, it can reference that master subcontract agreement. Again, we've got a great partnership with the Cromings Law Firm. They can help you, and then we can show you how you can actually put that all into JobTread and send that out and collect that. Whether you do it each year, or if you want to make it good for a couple years, whatever it is, just make sure that you've collected that documentation. Very important. And then I touched on it a little bit about again requiring. Collecting the proof of the work, collecting those completion photos. It's not only good for you to have that for documentation, for the customer if you need it later, but also to ensure that the subs are doing the work at the quality that you want. It's so important that you can collect this in real time. This is like probably the number one way that we were able to scale the number of concurrent jobs that we could manage at the GC that I ran, because we started requiring at the end of every single day, before the subs step foot off the job site, they needed to send us completion photos. They needed to upload them into JobTread. And if they did not, they were not going to get paid. And believe me, all it takes is that one time and the sub didn't do it. They submit the bill. We say, hey, you didn't submit it, you're not getting paid. They very much immediately will do it every single time there on out. Obviously if it's a first time offender, I'd say be flexible, maybe not tell them that, but like you do need to draw that hard line and say, this is a requirement. You need to submit your daily logs. I need to see the progress photos. I need to know about what happened on the job that day. And it's so important, again, for your own documentation purposes, that you have records of all of this information, so that if you need to, again, defend why you're not paying the sub the full amount, or defend, or maybe why you're not paying them at all, or why, if you need to defend against a customer or a litigation issue or whatever, you've got to collect that information. And so JobTread makes it really easy to do that. I can't encourage you enough to not let people send you text messages and email photos and, airdrop them. Like when you start getting all of this stuff all over the place and it's just decentralized, it is very hard to pull it together, and much less if you wait weeks or months to do it, when you're closing out the job, or even just after the fact. Like it's so much harder. You're going to have photos on all your subs phones and on your project managers phones. And, you got to have a process in place and collect it in real time every single day as it's happening. And that'll help you as well keep eyes on the quality of the work, on the things that are happening. We no longer had to have project managers sitting on the job site babysitting our subs every single day, all day, because now we could see as those updates were happening, as they made progress and they uploaded photos and submitted the daily logs. That gave the project managers, as well as me as the owner, the ability to view everything that's happening and make sure that it looks like things are going, and being done in the right place. Like I'll never forget this other story. Like we're literally like, we were told to come in and install a fence for a customer, and we just installed it on the wrong side of the building. And like if I would have seen photos, if we would have had a process to collect that in real time, I would have known. And instead we spent, several days building the fence in the wrong place, only to have to come back in and do it on the other side, because that's what we were contracted to do. And so there's so many reasons why being organized and being able to have that information and being able to put eyes on the progress that's being made every day can help save you time and help prevent, screw ups like that. All right, number 6, establish payment terms. So, this all needs to be documented in that master subcontract agreement, and even with your other vendors, with your suppliers, make sure that you're negotiating terms that are going to work in your favor. And that information needs to be included on all contracts, work orders, purchase orders. Like you've got to have that documented. You've got to have that agreed upon ahead of time. And, my advice to people, and especially with suppliers, whatever your terms are today, call them and ask for better terms. You have nothing to lose whatsoever, but you can potentially increase your terms and the favorability of them. I mean, if you've got a net 30 account with a particular supplier, call them and ask for net 45. If you can get better terms for yourself, that is going to allow you to have more of a buffer to then collect the payments from the customer, so that you can turn around and pay out your bills. It's best though if you do not have to front money, and that you're not having to use money that you haven't collected yet from the customer. So the longer that you can pay out, the slower that you can pay out, the better your terms are. That's going to help you tremendously from a cash flow perspective. It's also in particular with your subcontractors. I'm a big believer in, again, like, you can't pay the guys at the end of every day or even the end of the week. You need to have at least some sort of a buffer. We basically, paid out every 2 weeks, but it was the following 2 weeks that they would get paid, and that gave us time to ensure that the customer was satisfied with the work that was completed and that they were going to pay us, versus if you pay out immediately and then there's an issue and you got to send that sub back out. Believe me, once you've paid them, you have lost your leverage. You should always make sure that you have completed the job and that their work has been completed before paying them out. Now, if you need to make a progress payment, I get it. Sometimes that has to be done. That's fine. But like, don't fully pay for a job that has not been completed and signed off on by the customer, and they've agreed that they're satisfied. You've got to keep a little bit of that leverage in your pocket, so that if you do need to send them back out, that's so important that you can do that. And then, having a very clear process for bills. How should the subs and the suppliers, like, what is the process for them submitting bills to you, and making sure that those bills have a purchase order or work order number on every single one. It needs to be documented. It needs to be clear. And how are you going to receive them? I mean, hopefully they're not still mailing them in the mail. Sometimes I guess, you can't really do anything about that if that's the only process they've got, but is it an email address? Is it, if you have job trade, they can directly upload that bill straight to the PO or to the work order, whatever it is, have that as very clear and make sure it's documented on those work orders and purchase orders so that, they know how to submit their bills, give them again, I do think that you need to encourage them to submit them in a timely manner as well. Sometimes our guys would wait and they would just kind of submit at the very last minute to get into that next pay period. And, their documentation was just atrocious then, and so like we would rather them, to submit their bills, timely, whether even if it was at the end of the day or the end of the week, whatever it is, if you're going from one job to another, like just document that job and submit it and don't wait. It's just so much better to have very clear documentation and know exactly when they need to submit it and how. And then we talked about this a little bit, deferring making those payments, just, whatever those terms are. I mean, some people, paid on paid, if you can get away with that, if it works for you and if it works for them, fine. That's probably the best method, but, obviously you can't always do that. And so just to the extent though, that you can give yourself a buffer, it's so important because things will come up and you will need to send them back out to do the punch list or to finish something up or whatever it is. Again, the number one thing, make sure you're not double paying, and just that whatever you are paying out was what you agreed upon. It's what you expected. If there are additional, charges on that bill, like you need to understand them. And again, if it's something that is, reasonable and you're okay with it, fine, pay it. But if it's not, you can always reference that agreed upon contract that you had them sign, that work order, that purchase order. You got to do that. And again, it's just business. They need to understand though, that they are not going to get paid to do additional work that the customer asks them, or if they just feel like it. You need to establish that change order process for them as well, so that you can go get the change order approved from the customer, and then you issue them a change order. And again, we've documented it all and we've got clear understanding of that. All right, number 7. So rating your vendors. One thing that we found, and as we continued to grow our sub database, we realized that like it became a little bit hard to keep up with all the different subs and how they performed on the job. And so we ended up coming up with a rating system, where you could basically at the end of every job, the project manager could give them a rating, the customer could give them a rating, or that could just be based on their satisfaction, but you need to document how did they perform on that job. Were they reliable? Were they punctual? Did they communicate clearly? Was the quality of their work satisfactory? Whatever happened, if there were issues that came about, document that. And you need to log that so that you can keep up with who are your best subs, who are your 5 stars, your go-to every time. If they're booked, okay, go to your 4 stars. Okay, well, we really need someone. Now we're dipping into our 3 stars. But man, the people who are underperforming, who are not consistently delivering for the job, give them a 1 star and quit using them. Just you got to understand who your performers are, reward the performers by giving them additional work, and don't use the guys who aren't reliable and aren't delivering a high quality product for your customer. Being able to have that, and collect that is a great way in a post, job evaluation in your closeout process, whatever it may be. Just make sure you're having the discussion with the customer, with the project managers, and then look. Everyone's not perfect. Mistakes we made, that's fine. But if you start seeing trends, if they're making the same mistakes over and over again, then you need to make sure that doesn't keep happening. It's on you to provide ongoing coaching, to give them feedback, make sure that they're trained in the skills and the trades that you're hiring them to do. And so the only way to do that, though, is to take those times to reflect on their performance and to evaluate that and document that. It can be very, very hard as you scale your business. As business owners, there are a million things that you get hit with every single day. And so, when you're trying to look back, over the last, 3 or 4 months and how a particular sub, performed, it can be very hard to get an accurate, objective picture of that if you didn't document it. So I'm big belief in just, rate the guys, keep track of that. If situations occur, you ding them with, with a star or a point system or however you want to do it, but just make sure that you understand, who is on the fence and who's, borderline not going to keep, being used on your jobs. And so, as you start to look at your bench too, you can understand, how many, all-stars you've got, how many mediocre guys, and, how many underperformers. I read this book once. It's called Top Grading, but basically you always want to try to hire A players or B plus players who have the potential to be coached and trained into A players. So, again, if you can develop someone into an A player over time, then that may be worth your time and your investment in them and to help them, grow and improve their skill set. But boy, if they're just not getting it, you need to have that documentation so that you can make an objective decision when to quit using them for your business. You can't keep using underperformers. It's just not going to help your business grow. It's going to affect your reputation, and it's going to, could end up costing you a lot more than just that one job. So, always be recruiting and looking for those A players, and then, rewarding them too. Your guys at the end of the year, make sure that who those performers were and go above and beyond to give them a little bit of an extra bonus or a bump or whatever it may be to thank them for their continued high performance work. It's so important, and you want to keep your best guys in there and get those underperformers out of there. All right. So I've gone through those 7 steps. Again, how can JobTread help? Our goal, and really we built this out of a needs basis. I've learned all of the mistakes and the challenges, running that general contracting business. And so, we've set up processes and we have tools built out in JobTread to help you, from, again, the pre-construction, the sales and the estimating and collecting those bid requests and doing that budgeting, having all those contracts, to when you actually get into the project management, helping you stay on time and on budget, recording and documenting everything that we talked about earlier, and then again, managing the cash flow, the finances, all of that information. It's a really powerful tool. We've made JobTread extremely affordable. We want to get it out there into as many contractors' hands to help you, protect yourself and help you to win more jobs and be able to deliver the exact, profit margins that you set forth to make for your business, and making sure that your customers are satisfied so that they'll turn into, your biggest references and help you continue growing your business. So yeah, would love to show you more about JobTread if you don't already have it. And we've also got some great partnerships that we're starting to establish here. I think the one of note with reference to today's webinar, again, the Cromings Law Firm, directly in JobTread in our marketplace. You can learn more about those contract offerings that they've got, and you can actually directly purchase them and then schedule your initial consultation with their attorneys. Highly recommend it. It's so important to make sure that you're covering your ass, that you've got, all of your documents and contracts just buttoned up so that, again, if that worst case scenario happens, you have mitigated your risk to the best of your ability. And then again, if you do need a lawyer, you got Cromings right there. They're ready. They understand your business. They understand your contracts. They've written it custom for you, for your state. So, again, hopefully that worst case doesn't happen, but if it does, they're great. They're a great partner for us. And I highly encourage you to work with them. So yeah, again, JobTread is a great way to keep everyone on the same page. We'd love to show you more if you're not already using it. Just go to jobtread.com/demo, schedule a demo today. Our team would be happy to spend the time walking you through it, teaching you more about the tool and how it can help you better manage your subcontractors.